Are you out of your mind? Jake's voice was incredulous, bouncing off the barren walls of the abandoned warehouse. You can't be serious about this plan. I'm dead serious, Jake. Emily crossed her arms, staring him down. The shadows of the warehouse stretched like dark fingers across the concrete floor. It's our only shot at clearing our names. They weren't just guilty of petty theft. They were entangled in a heist gone wrong. 2 weeks prior, they had stumbled upon a drug deal in their neighborhood. Instead of fleeing, they made a rash decision to intervene, hoping to be the heroes, only to end up as unwitting accomplices. Now, they were accused of taking a bag filled with illicit cash. We'll find the evidence that proves we didn't do it, Emily insisted, brandishing a flashlight. Look, we've already got the location and the timing. It's worth the risk. Jake pushed back against the stack of crates behind him, agitation evident in his posture. And what if they see us? You know how ruthless they can be. They won't. The deal is taking place tonight, and there's a police surveillance team already monitoring the area. All we need is to find that bag and give it to them before the deal goes down. A tense silence settled between them as Jake weighed the consequences. You really think we can just walk in and waltz out with it? I know we can, Emily replied, confidence rising in her chest. I don't plan on getting caught twice. Fine, he relented, pinching the bridge of his nose. But what's the plan? With a hint of a smile, she began to outline their strategy. We'll wait until the sun sets, then we'll use the service entrance on the east side. It should lead us right into their stash room. We're in. We grab the bag. We're out. As she spoke, Jake moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Just promise me you'll be careful. If something goes wrong, I won't leave without you. That seemed to ease his worry, at least a bit. The tension was fraught with electricity as they waited for darkness to cloak their mission. The day wore on like molasses, and finally, twilight descended upon the warehouse district. The air was thick with anticipation as they crouched behind the crates, heartbeats syncing with the glowing streetlights. With a deep breath, Emily nodded at Jake, signaling him to follow. They tiptoed toward the service entrance, which stood slightly ajar, the metallic creak barely audible. Inside, the dim light revealed rows of stacked boxes and crates covered in dust. Emily led the way, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. Listen, Jake whispered, pausing suddenly, eyes wide. Through the faint whispers echoing from a nearby room, Emily caught fragments of conversation. Once we get the money in hand, we'll knock out the witnesses. Her stomach twisted. We need to hurry, Emily urged, quickening her pace towards a back room. As they crept forward, the stench of sweat and something metallic hung thick in the air. Just ahead, she could see a door marked authorized personnel only. Hey, she indicated, heart racing. Sliding through the door, they found themselves in a small room filled with monitors and scattered paperwork. Among the clutter, Emily spotted the bag sitting on a table, just a few feet away. We got it, she breathed, but before she could reach for it, a sharp voice filled the air. Who's there? Emily and Jake stiffened, glancing at each other. They hadn't been as stealthy as they thought. The door to the room swung open, and a silhouette appeared, illuminated by the golden light from the hallway. Get down! Jake hissed, pulling Emily behind a desk. The figure entered, scanning the room with suspicion. Sweat prickled at Emily's neck as she held her breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. I know you're in here, the man said, his voice low and dangerous. You can't hide forever. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Jake trembled beside her, and her mind raced with possible escapes. There had to be a way out. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, the door swung open again, revealing another figure, a different one, clearly agitated. Frank, we need to move. The cops are on their way. Emily's heart sank. They were running out of time. Let's grab the bag and get out of here, Frank said, advancing toward the table. Go now, Jake urged, but before Emily could move, their eyes locked onto the bag, and fear turned to adrenaline. Go, she yelled, diving for the bag and wrapping her hands around it just as Frank turned back, eyes wide. This isn't happening. Pushing herself up just as Jake pulled her arm, they bolted for the door. But the first figure shouted, "Get them!" Chaos erupted as footsteps thundered behind them. They raced back down the hallway, the echo of their pursues growing louder. No plan, no backup, just sheer instinct driving them forward. By the door, Jake yelled, pointing to the exit up ahead. They stumbled out onto the street, the cool air slapping them awake. Behind them, curses filled the air as lights of approaching vehicles flickered in the distance. Adrenaline surged, and without a second thought, they sprinted into the night, the weight of the bag heavy in Emily's grasp. She had no idea what awaited them, but the hunt had begun. Racing down the quiet street, Emily and Jake turned sharply around a corner, desperately seeking a safe haven. The weight of the bag felt heavier with each frantic step. Adrenaline pumped through her veins, and a single thought dominated her mind. Get away. Do you have any idea where we're going? Jake panted next to her. No, but anywhere is better than here. They rushed past darkened houses and manicured lawns, the distant sound of sirens piercing the early night air. Time felt suspended, every second stretching like rubber as they pushed onward. "Stop!" shouted a voice from behind, harsh and demanding. Emily dared a glance over her shoulder. Figures were pouring after them, silhouetted against the swaying streetlights. Panic gripped her, and she ran faster. "Back this way," she shouted, veering toward an alley. The dimness of it swathed them like a cloak as they ducked behind a dumpster, panting, hearts hammering in their chests. "Did we lose them?" Jake whispered, scanning the shadows nervously. The echo of footsteps grew faint for a moment, but the sound of running cars crept closer still. "Not yet," Emily replied, sinking against the cold metal. "We can't stay here." Peering cautiously around the edge of their hiding spot, she glimpsed a police car rolling down the street. "Jake, that's it." "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "I'm going to spill everything to them. If we explain, maybe they'll—" "No," he interrupted. "You can't trust them. This isn't just some petty theft. We're in deep." "Then what do you suggest?" she shot back, growing frustrated. "Let's stick to the plan. We find a place to lay low for now," he insisted. As they argued, a shadow loomed near the back entrance of the alley. Emily froze, eyes wide as one of the figures reached the mouth of the alley, scanning the area. "Stay quiet," Jake whispered, a fierce look on his face. The figure stepped closer, and Emily held her breath, heart racing as he narrated inside his earpiece. "We're close. Search every alley until we find them." "They're looking for us," Emily said, voice barely a whisper. "We have to move."
But before they could retreat to another part of the alley, a second figure joined the first, both illuminated under the streetlights. They were near, there was no doubt. "Let's check behind those dumpsters," one of the men said. "No one could hide there, it's too obvious," the other shot back. "Let's keep going." "Just a second," the first man insisted. The tension crackled in the air. Emily could almost hear her heart beating. They shifted slightly, searching for any hint of an escape a mere breath away. Then she heard it, a soft glimmer of footsteps sounding from the opposite side, barely audible over the chaos. "What's that?" Jake murmured, squinting into the shadows. Before she could reply, Emily turned her head, surprised to find another figure silently gesturing from further back down the alley. It was a woman, her face shadowed but unmistakably connecting eyes with them, beckoning them forward. Without thinking, Emily made a split-second decision, grabbing Jake's arm and pulling him towards the woman, escaping the two imposing figures behind the dumpster. "Follow her," Emily urged, and they dashed toward the woman, who led them deeper into the dim alley. She turned sharply down a narrow path, leading them to a hidden door nestled between crumbling bricks. With a quick hand motion, the woman flashed a badge. "Hurry! Get inside." "What?" Jake glanced nervously at Emily as the woman pushed the door open just enough to allow them entry. "There's no time. Come on," she insisted again, her voice steady and urgent. "I'll explain inside." Without hesitation, they stepped through the door, Jake glancing skeptically back at the alley. Inside, the atmosphere shifted, linen sheets covered old couches, and shadows danced in the corners of the dimly lit room. "Who are you?" Emily asked, a mixture of distrust and apprehension sparking her voice. "I'm Officer Charlotte Reynolds. I'm here to help," the woman replied, her eyes scanning the darkened street outside the door. "You two are in a lot of trouble, but I can protect you if you cooperate." Emily exchanged glances with Jake, unsure of whether to trust her. "We just wanted to recover what they accused us of stealing." "We know that. But you need to know they'll do anything to keep you quiet." "Quiet?" Emily shot back, real fear beginning to edge its way into her thoughts. "What do you mean?" Charlotte hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "You're in the middle of something dangerous. They're not just drug dealers, they're part of a larger ring. They'll hunt you down," Charlotte continued. "But if you can help us bring them down, we can turn this around for you." "What do you want us to do?" Jake asked, skepticism still tainting his voice. "I can't protect you if I don't know exactly what we're dealing with, but it'll mean one last dangerous job." Emily's pulse raced as Charlotte's eyes glinted with sincerity and urgency. "Do you want to clear your names or run the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders? Help us take them down and you'll be safe." As she looked at Jake, she could see the uncertainty that mirrored her own effort. "If we're doing this," she said, voice firm, "we're doing it together." With a nod of agreement, the three of them began hatching a plan, silently knowing they were diving deeper into a world crawling with danger. Hours later, the air felt electric with tension as they gathered in the makeshift safe house. The fervent buzz of solving their problem swirled with an equal sense of foreboding. "All right, here's what we know," Charlotte stated, pinning up a map of the warehouse district on a corkboard. "The deal is happening soon, but we need to establish how we'll intersect." Emily leaned closer, studying the intricate web of markings, while Jake remained on edge. "So we just walk in again?" he asked, skepticism lacing his voice. "Not quite. We need you to blend into their operation," Charlotte replied, pulling out a pair of stolen uniforms. "We'll disguise you and have you deliver the bag back to the buyers." "Deliver the bag? Are you nuts?" Jake exclaimed, glancing at Emily for support. "We can't let them see you're coming from our side," Charlotte explained. "If they suspect you're working with the police, they could use you as leverage." "And what happens to us once we hand over the bag?" Emily asked, a hint of resentment creeping into her tone. "Once you deliver the bag, we'll move in quickly and take them all down. You'll be cleared and safe," Charlotte reassured them. The resolve in her eyes ignited a faint flicker of optimism in Emily. With a reluctant nod, Emily took the uniform, and Jake followed suit. The plan was reckless, but desperation curled around them like a shadow, urging them to follow through despite the risk. As they dressed, Charlotte whispered final instructions, informing them of the key signifiers to watch for. "We'll be on radio. Stay close, and if anything doesn't feel right, get out." Grinding her teeth, Emily nodded, a potent mix of fear and determination propelling her forward. The night descended upon the warehouse district, a perfect veil for deception as they made their way back. The sounds of double-checking their comms filled the silence of their nerves. Arriving at the warehouse, the air thickened with tension. Jake flexed his fingers, his fear evident. "What if we get caught?" "Then we have to be smart," Emily shot back, her voice trembling with anticipation. "We stick to the plan." Together, they slipped through the weathered entrance, voices muttering indistinctly ahead. The buzz of excitement propelled them forward. "Remember what I said. Hang back and follow my lead," Jake instructed, his bravado surfacing. As they entered the main room, they spotted the figures completing transactions. Surrounded by crates filled with contraband, it was clear, this was a ring that spread far beyond their expectations. "Get ready," Charlotte's voice crackled in their ears, tension spilling from each word. Emily and Jake moved forward, trying to blend seamlessly into the scene. As they approached, she glanced at the table where the bag lay. It was right there, a tempting prize against the chaos. Feeling Jake's presence at her side, she whispered urgently, "Just stick to the plan. We grab it, and we get out." But then, one of the main figures glanced toward them, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "You too," he exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" Emily's heart raced, and before she had a chance to respond, the figure stepped closer, his face twisting in recognition. "You're the ones that tried to stop us." Just delivering this," she stammered, extending the bag with a shaky hand. "No. Get them," he shouted, his voice echoing throughout the room. At that moment, chaos erupted, shouts filling the air as Emily and Jake pivoted, bolting toward the exit. "Run!" Jake yelled, lunging ahead of her, adrenaline pumping furiously. The shouts of anticipation flooded her ears as they weaved through the cluttered room, echoes reverberating behind them. She could sense the figures chasing them, shadows slipping through the dimness.
"Come on," Jake shouted, dodging around a corner. They couldn't stop. They couldn't look back. As they burst through a side door, Charlotte's voice crackled again. "The squad is on their way. Don't stop for anything." "I can't believe this is happening," Emily panted, glancing back again just in time to see one of the figures pushing through the door, a flash of furious determination in his eyes. "Go," she shouted back at Jake, who looked ready to falter at their odds. They sprinted down the corridor away from reaches of alarms, the adrenaline transforming fear into raw energy. Outside, jagged breaths filled Emily's lungs as she darted toward a fence that separated the warehouse from the alley. Without hesitation, she leapt over it, Jake close behind. But as they landed, Jake stumbled, twisting his ankle awkwardly, pain flashing in his eyes. "I can't. Emily, go." "No way. I'm not leaving you." Suddenly, footsteps pounded after them, and she cursed her fate. In seconds, they'd be cornered. "Quick, climb," she urged, panic transcending their previous banter. Gripping Jake's wrist, she helped him stagger toward the edge of the fence. They scrambled back inside, back to safety, only for him to warily lean against her shoulder while breathing through the pain. "I can't keep running," Jake gasped, eyes darting as he glanced behind them. "Just hold on. We can't let them find us," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the shuddering shadows that threatened to overtake them. "It hurts, Em," he faltered, groaning as the footsteps of their pursuers closed in. "There." Emily pointed to a nearby alleyway, dark and narrow. "We can hide until they pass." In a moment, adrenaline surged once again. They pushed forward into the tight space, where the cacophony of nearby voices faded. Huddling together, they listened as distant figures rummaged around, their anger palpable. "Where are they?" one man growled. "Search everywhere." "Find them," the other echoed back, frustration mounting. Feeling her composure slip, Emily's breath quickened. They had to get out. Whatever it took, they needed to find a way back to safety and finish what they'd started. Tension ricocheted off the alley walls as adrenaline coursed through Emily's veins. The yells of their pursuers blended into the rhythm of her racing heart. She glanced at Jake, his breathing strained, eyes glistening with uncertainty. "Can you walk?" she whispered urgently. "Yeah," he replied, determination flickering beneath his pain. "But we can't just sit here." "Right. Let's find a way out then." They crept along the graffiti-laden walls, careful to avoid the splashes of light that fell through gaps in the buildings. Each step was tentative, the darkness wrapping around them like a cloak. Emerging cautiously onto another street, they halted when they heard a faint rustling behind them. The figures were closer. She could almost feel the weight of their anger pressing down. "We have to split up," Emily said suddenly, momentarily shocking her friend. "I'll draw them away. You find a way to get to the cops and tell them everything that's happened." "No," Jake protested, eyes wide with fear. "I'm not leaving you." "Please, Jake," she insisted. "If they catch both of us, it's over. This is the only way." He hesitated, the panic evident on his face. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. "Okay, just be careful." Emily took a deep breath and dashed into the nearest street, turning sharply while calling for attention. "Hey, over here." The shuffle of footsteps behind her intensified as she heard the shouts ricochet into the night. "Get her!" one shouted from afar, and relief washed over her momentarily. She had their attention. Dashing down the street, Emily navigated through cars parked haphazardly along the curb, her mind racing for options. She vaulted over a fence, confidence reigniting as she pushed onward. But suddenly, a hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Found you." In an instinctual move, she elbowed the figure, one of the thugs she had encountered before, in the stomach before sprinting forward again. Echoes of their anger rang through the air, propelling her further. But as she turned the corner, the main figure appeared again, blocking her escape. "You won't get away this time," he growled, closing the distance quickly. Her heartbeat quickened as she desperately looked for an exit. A doorway loomed ahead, and she sprinted toward it, throwing herself inside just as he lunged forward. She collided with the door, slamming it shut behind her. Panting heavily, she leaned against it, heart pounding in her ears. She peered into the dimly lit room before her. It was a small, dusty office filled with clutter, papers piled high, crates lining the walls, a desk and a window barred with iron grates. "Emily!" Jake's voice rang out as he burst through another door, relief washing over his face. "I thought I'd lost you." "Not yet," she responded quickly, pointing toward the back exit. "They're coming." Together, they moved to the barred window, adrenaline fueling their movements. "I'll break the bars. Just keep lookout." "You can't be serious," Jake exclaimed, glancing toward the door. "I can." Ignoring his protests, Emily gathered her strength and gripped the nearest iron bar, applying every ounce of energy to yank it free. It clanked loudly against the floor, and she glanced nervously toward the still-closed door. "Can you get the other side?" she said, trying to suppress panic. "I'll try," Jake responded, grabbing hold of a bar as well. Their efforts drowned out the noise of their pursuers, filling the air with an angry atmosphere of clanking metal. But just as the last bar rattled and fell, a shout echoed from the hallway. "Move! They are not far behind." "Go, go!" Emily yelled, squeezing through the gap, her body sliding through just as Jake followed behind. They burst into the night air, a rush of freedom colliding with their fears. But crowds of figures were beginning to appear ahead, surrounding the area and cutting off their paths. "Jake!" Emily clutched his arm tightly. "We have to. Down this way." Jake interrupted, pushing past her toward an alley branching off before them. They sprinted as fast as they could, the sound of chaos echoing around them, shouts piercing the night. Emily felt the urgency pulsing beneath her skin, the knowledge that they had to find a way out. Spotting an embankment nearby, Jake gestured fleetingly. "Climb." The wall felt high but not impossible, and they scrambled up, adrenaline fueling their ascents. As they reached the top, they could finally see the street outside where police cars were gathering, the flashing red lights casting stark shadows upon the ground. But the figures who chased them were gaining ground, angling closer. "Come on," Emily yelled urgently, poised at the edge. Just as Jake launched himself over, something whizzed past, hitting the wall next to him. The metallic clang of a bullet rang through the air, and Emily's heart dropped. "Get down," she screamed, urging Jake to dive for cover. Tucking beneath a nearby awning, they protected themselves with what little shelter they could find as chaos continued behind. "I see them," one shouted, tracking the pair. Gunfire erupted behind them. "Help is on the way," Jake yelled, trembling as he huddled against the ground. "Just stay down." Bullets ricocheted against concrete, but through the cacophony of sounds, Emily remained focused, scanning for a path forward. Suddenly, she caught sight of a familiar face, Officer Charlotte, approaching the scene with a handful of officers. "Over there," Emily shouted, pointing toward the alley as she and Jake made a break for it, dodging a shower of bullets. Charlotte waved her arms, an evacuation signal indicating the officers were rushing their way. Quickly, Emily and Jake dashed toward Charlotte, the promise of safety looming ever closer. But the pursuing figures showed no sign of letting up, and chaos continued to fill the air. "Cover me," Charlotte ordered as they assembled around the entrance of the alley where the figures poured in. With a fierce determination in her voice, Charlotte turned toward Emily and Jake, eyes glistening with hope. "This is it. Get ready." "Now," she yelled, and the officers surged forward, flanking their attackers with the determination of a sudden storm. Gunfire exchanged with screams as Emily and Jake found themselves momentarily shielded. The chaos exploded into a whirlwind. The clash of good versus evil unveiled in vivid intensity. Emily could barely keep track of the mayhem happening around her, but instinct drove her forward. "We have to get the evidence out," she urged Jake. "Right. The bag," he shouted back, maneuvering through the fray. His voice filled with purpose ignited Emily's spirit, and together they moved toward where they last saw the bag resting within chaotic arms. Daring to breach a crowd, they forged ahead, adrenaline dousing their fears. Then, as if everything slowed, she spotted it, a familiar dark backpack resting riskily upon a table, just where it had been before, witnessed by the chaos unfolding around it. "Get the bag, now!" Emily yelled, reaching out as both of them lunged for it. They wrapped helpless fingers around the battered strap, and just as they pulled it away, their world shrank for a breath. It felt like escaping the jaws of a wild beast. As they turned, though, the furious figure emerged from the shadows, eyes burning with rage. "That's mine," he bellowed. Emma felt the darkness creeping in again but remained unwavering. "Over my dead body," she shouted, heaving the bag to safety. Just beyond, she glimpsed Charlotte fighting against the melee, pushing forward to shield them. With a deep breath, they dove back toward the chaos. Jake moved beside her, holding her hand tightly as Emily felt the prickle of danger swirl around. Swiftly, they bolted past Charlotte, adrenaline fiercely empowering them in their flight toward freedom. But as the world exploded once again, snarling threats did not dissipate. Around them, the ruckus of police flooded the streets until the shadows began to retract, illuminating paths toward safety. The villains roared in outrage as officers efficiently detained them. Finally, as the chaos ensued and fear ebbed away, Emily's heart surged with hopeful realization. After all they had faced, they were almost free. She and Jake turned, meeting Charlotte's gaze as officers cuffed the remaining figures. Their fight felt monumental, their resilience marked in the faces of the people who had once hunted them but now surrendered into the light of justice. "We did it," Emily whispered breathlessly to Jake, the weight of uncertainty lifting as relief washed over her. "This is just the beginning." Together, they'd overcome darkness, now bound for clarity, united by struggle and shielded by truth. They'd face whatever came next, hand in hand,